as I've been introduced, the name is Wiseman Ngubo. I look after the operations of an organization called CAPASSO. So briefly, my task when I got it from KUMISA was to discuss the landscape of armor collecting societies in South Africa. So what I've done is a brief presentation. I don't necessarily need the presentation per se, but I want you to see what I'm talking about as I'm going through it. Because what I want to showcase is just what does the landscape currently look like, and which collecting societies do you join for which purpose if you're a musician in South Africa. Né? So it's a very short one. Okay, so I'll start obviously with the organization I represent, which is called CAPASSO. What does CAPASSO do really? CAPASSO represents what you call songwriters in essence. So the people who come up with, okay, I think it's fine now. So the people who come up with the song, these are the people who come up with the melody, the composition, the lyrics to the song. Those people, so in any song, in essence, from a legal perspective, you'll have two copyrights at the very least. Né? You have the copyright in the composition, and then you have the copyright in the sound recording. And depending on which copyright you're exercising, there's certain rights that will fall within organizations such as CAPASSO, and then there are certain rights that will fall within other organizations that I shall illuminate later. So the first part is when you come up with a song, you create a melody, you create a lyric, you create the structure, you arrange the song. You've now created what's known as the original copyright. And then comes the entrepreneurial aspect of the music business where somebody says, I see future in this and I want to be able to sell it to some people, so therefore I'll pay for studio time to record this particular song. And they get somebody with talent, like Husena, to sing the song. They then package that and sell it to you and I. That's the second copyright. That's the copyright that everybody really interacts with generally. That's when you buy the song, when you buy the CD, you are buying what is known as the sound recording. When you're signing to a record label as a musician, you are signing to exploit the second part of the copyright, which is the sound recording. But before all of that happens, it all begins with a note, and that note is thought of or conceptualized and then eventually created by a songwriter. And those are the people that organizations such as CAPASSO and SAMRO represent. So, in SA right now, there's about 8 collecting societies that exist for different rights, right? So, what I'll be trying to do with this presentation is just highlight what those rights are and how they affect you as a musician, right? So the first part is when you've written a song, you then get, for ease of understanding, the moment you create a song that's worth copyright protecting, you then get controls. These controls basically allow you to dictate how we as the public interact with your creative expression in the form of a copyright. So once you've written the song, you can then dictate, or people then need to go through you if they want to do certain things with that song. One of those things is to broadcast it or publicly perform those songs. One of those things is to reproduce that song. One of those things is to synchronize that song with any moving images or any of those other controls. So basically how then collecting societies are formed is they follow some of those controls. So you would go to a SAMRO and say, because it's impractical for Ukhozi FM, Ikakasi, or any other radio station to go to each and every individual songwriter to get access to a song before they play it every single time, you then have collecting societies that enable the proper functioning from a licensing perspective, so the ability for the radio stations, the digital platforms to exploit the music, whilst at the same time creating a mechanism for the people who created that song to be able to earn for that exploitation. So you then go to a SAMRO for one, to then say, every time a radio station or anybody wants to publicly perform my song. That's one of the controls. Every time everybody wants to exercise this particular control of the work that I've created, SAMRO can issue a license, and then you can go to SAMRO and receive compensation from the license that they would have obtained from that particular user, and then get paid for that. So SAMRO basically looks after the right for your song to be publicly broadcast, the right for your song to be performed in public, and the right for that song to be communicated to the public. Then you have a secondary control, which is collectively managed, which is what CAPASSO looks at, which is the right for the song to be reproduced in any way, shape, or form. Ne? So whenever you've written a song, you have, in most cases, a record label would control what's known as the master recording. And then from that master recording, they would dub multiple other copies. You've now sold platinum, which means you've sold 30,000 copies. It means they've reproduced that particular master 30,000 times and sold it to the public 30,000 times. That's why there's, you can then say you have a platinum selling record, right? But within that record, there are songs in there. So for every copy of that song that is being sold, the songwriter deserves a particular share of that song. And that's where CAPASSO comes in. So CAPASSO then allows, they will then enter into licensing arrangements with the likes of recording record labels, digital platforms, your SABCs, your multi-choices of the world, your YouTubes of the world, and says, every time when a song that is written by one of the songwriters we represent is reproduced in any way, here's a royalty that is going to be leverable for that reproduction, at which point that when you then exploit that reproduction, you then pay it back to the songwriters. On the flip side, you have the second copyright that I was talking about. You have what's known as a recording or a master right. In the master right space, and then I'll highlight it a little bit better in the next slide, you have, in essence, the record label and its structures. So there's two different structures for record labels in the country at the moment. One is called the Recording Industry of South Africa, which is RISA. The other is called the Association of Independent Record Companies of South Africa, which is ECCO. In essence, they represent the same interests, just for different entities. So the recording industry has amongst its members the three major labels that exist. The majority of the members are still independent record companies, but amongst those, they have the three major labels. ECCO, on the other hand, represents primarily independent record companies. And those two associations then exercise some rights on behalf of their members. Primarily, the rights that they exercise as a collective are the rights to music videos, which are, so whenever a TV station broadcasts music videos, there's a certain royalty that is paid for the ability to broadcast their music video. That happens and is paid through to these two associations, depending on where your membership sits. As a record company that controls and makes music videos, you will then become a member of either RISA or ECCO, and then get paid that royalty for those music videos. Second to that, you have a royalty which is famously known as needle time in South Africa. But in essence, this royalty is a royalty paid for the ability for people to play, broadcast, or communicate a particular recording to the public. So it's not necessarily a copyright in the strictest sense for the copyright experts in the room. It's what's known in the international space as a neighboring right. So it's a right that stems from the fact that when the record label is creating this record, anybody who has given off their artistic talent in the process of the creation of that record, or anybody who has given off an ability either through payment or through arranging the studio to make that happen is entitled to some sort of remuneration for that payment. And here's a bit of a history lesson. This particular remuneration comes from the fact that back in the day, before we had the ability to record performances, if you were a session musician, you would get, and I wanted to book Sina and her band to come and play. Before we had the ability to record that performance, every time I wanted to hear Sina perform, I'd have to book her, pay her, and she'd have to do the same to her band. Now in comes the ability to have them perform once, and then arises an ability for me to replay that recording multiple times in her absence. When that happens, if there's no remuneration for the multiple broadcasts of that recording, they're out of pocket. Because in essence, every time you are playing that particular song in a particular place, if the DJ plays a song right now, if we wanted to hear that song before the ability to record happened, you'd have to get that band to come here, play, and that band would get remunerated for being here. But now with technology, you can play that song. Then there was a need to compensate for that ability to play recordings from an artistic perspective without necessarily having these guys be present there. And that's where needle time comes from. And that is, so it's a payment. It's not necessarily that needle time rights holders have copyright per se, but it's compensation for the fact that their performances have been substituted in a more technological space. And then on the recording side, there's two particular royalties that I wanted to highlight that are not necessarily known, or collecting societies that are not necessarily known or understood very well from a music perspective. And these are the two on the copyright in the composition side that are basically standalone. So one is known as CCLI, and I've highlighted there as a reprographic royalty. Basically what that means is the ability to display lyrics. So CCLI is called the Christian Copyright Licensing Institute, if I remember correctly. But what it does is, most of the time when you go to contemporary churches, you'll sit there, they'll display lyrics on a projector, and you'll be able to sing those lyrics along with the band at the church. The ability to display that lyric attracts a royalty. So especially for gospel musician in the space, it is absolutely pivotal that you are familiar with CCLI and understand exactly what that means, and figure out a way to ensure that you get your just dues from that organization. The second one, which is administered by DALRO. DALRO is a subsidiary of the SAMRO Group, but what they do and their importance in the music space is that they handle what's known as musicals. So if you write musicals and the music performed and annotated within a musical, DALRO handles and licenses those. So if you go watch Sarafina at the Playhouse or anywhere, those performances that are being done there, that particular play is licensed by DALRO. And so if you're a playwright and you write music within that play, it's absolutely pivotal that you become a member of DALRO. The last part there that I haven't really highlighted on, right, is what's known as, I think it's called sync in the general sense of the word, because most of our music industry lingo actually is borrowed from American entertainment, but you won't find the word sync in our copyright law. So what you find is the right to basically reproduce anything that you've created, whether it's the sound recording or the musical work, and synchronize it with moving images. So whenever your song is being used in an advert, or is being used in a movie, it's being used in any moving image, really, or your lyrics are being displayed in a moving image in some way, shape, or form, you then have the ability, as the person who wrote the song, or if you're a record company, the person who invested in the creation of that particular record, to dictate how that usage takes place. And that's generally known as a sync fee. Most of most of the sync licensing actually does not flow through a collecting organization. Usually, they would approach the relevant people who own that particular right, whether it be a master right or the publishing right, to clear that. But the reason I've included it there is because there's a huge role that collecting societies such as CAPASSO play in, if you're an advertising agency and you want to find out who to speak to. You want to use AKA's song, or you want to use Amifaku's song, but generally you would know Amifaku. You don't necessarily know who Benza got into the studio when the writing session was being made to create that song. You might not necessarily know how to reach Benza. That's where a collecting society like Samro and CAPASSO would assist, in a sense that we have databases to know exactly who the songwriters are who participated in that particular musical work and who their chosen publishers are. And in that sense, we then can assist in facilitating and ensuring that that particular sync happens. Okay, so different royalty streams. Where do all of these arise and how? These are not exhaustive, by the way. It's just a list to try and illustrate where exactly some of these, because it's also important when you speak to collecting societies to understand where the royalty flows from so that you can see whether or not you are getting compensated fully for some of the exploitation of your music. Because it's pointless expecting a fish to climb a tree. So if you're expecting a Nil Time society to pay you for royalty stemming from the streaming of your music on a platform like Apple Music, you are expecting the impossible. So we'll start with the public performance. Public performance, if you remember in the slide, will come from SAMRO. These are some of the places where these royalties stem from. So live performances are a very, very key element, but most songwriters actually underutilize them. So whenever you are performing at any, whether it's a festival or a venue like this, the ICC would have already been licensed as a venue by a SAMRO. They pay a set fee every year. All it takes for you as a musician who's now performing at the ICC to earn a live performance royalty is for you to complete a set list. The 3 songs that Sina performed here. She completes that set list, does one of 2 things. Gets the promoter, in this case, which would be KUMISA, to confirm that these are the songs that Sina performed at this venue on this day, and she submits that set list to SAMRO. And flowing from that, when SAMRO does the live performance distribution, she will get her prorated share or at least the songwriters of those songs. And it becomes very crucial when you are performing covers, because when you perform covers, the original creators of those songs need to be compensated somehow for having written a song that you deem good enough to put in your set. So the live performance sets are very, very crucial, and I would employ you, all the musicians, to do them. The second part, if promoters, because sometimes promoters can be shady, if the promoter is not necessarily prepared to sign, generally it's acceptable in the industry to send through the booking agreement that you would have entered into, that confirms that you were indeed booked for this particular event. You then performed, you submit that alongside your set list, and it enables distribution of these live performance royalties. This is, and I'll reiterate, this is very, very crucial for the musicians in the house, because this is very underutilized. You end up losing money because you are not submitting. Every gig you go to, Just do a set list, get the promoter to sign and submit it. It's passive income, easy money for things. And generally, especially if you are performing your own music all the time, like you have one album or 5 songs that you perform at every gig and you get booked 3 to 4 times a month, though that's just passive income that you can get. And by submitting, because a lot of other musicians don't, you might end up with a market share higher than what is realistically your market share in the market. Okay, then you get TV broadcasts, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. But the one aspect I want to highlight here is a lot of us, when we speak about royalties, focus on what we call chart music. So I've written a song that Amifaku performs, or Sinner performs, or an AKA performs, and that's what I chase. There's a lot of money in TV broadcasting from what's called non-chart music, which is production music. When Generation comes on, there's a theme song in there. That theme song gets paid every single time that episode is played. So if you're a composer and you place a theme song for any TV production, every movie, that's income that you could earn from a SAMRO, and on the flip side, you would also earn from a CAPASSO. In addition to the theme songs, whenever there's a scene, whenever there's a love song, or a love scene or whatever, you'll hear the mood change because the music in the background in any movie or any series, that music is also being compensated for in the form of royalties. And and a lot of those, most of the time, would be hordes and hordes of hard drives that people who have written music that is not necessarily commercial music, and these hard drives get given to production houses. When they make this thing and they need to set a mood, they take that production music and they put it into these scenes, and thereby generate a lot of money for the people who compose that music. Fast forward. I think the one aspect I want to highlight is the streaming side of the public performance. So for every stream, there's 2 royalties that will be paid, at least from a songwriter's perspective, right? You have what's known as the mechanical right, because the song is being reproduced in some way, and then you have the performance right. So for every stream, you should be getting a payment from a CAPASSO and a payment from a SAMRO. And on the flip side, if you happen to also be the performing artist signed to a fifth season, you will also get money that flows directly from the record label to you as the person who performed that song for that stream. Now, that's 3 forms of income from one stream in one platform. So AMI has 20 million streams. The values of that we can debate, but in essence, for each of those 20 million streams that she's garnered to date, the label will get paid as fifth season, which then eventually says she'll get paid. She doubles up as a songwriter, so she'll get paid from CAPASSO through her publisher, and then she'll get paid from SAMRO through her publisher and directly for her composer share for that one stream that she received. So what this highlights really is when you are speaking to collecting societies and you are looking to ensure that you are getting paid, the holistic value chain of the music industry is where you then get your full payment. You're not going to go to SAMRO and ask why you haven't been paid your artist fees, because SAMRO isn't supposed to be paying you your artist fees. You're not going to come to CAPASSO and ask for those artist fees. But the moment you undertake a holistic view of where and how the ecosystem works symbiotically to generate that income for you in whatever role you've played in the creation of that song, you'll then get earnings from. And then I think, in the interest of time, I think that's it. So generally, on a reproduction side, whatever is really being licensed by a SAMRO, you will get from a CAPASSO. Save at this instance, and I'll highlight this before I step down, program direct, is a save for radio. At the moment, because of two things. One, industry practice, and then two, just some anomalies within our law. Radio stations don't pay mechanical royalties as yet. It will change. We're working on it. But as yet, that is the only place where you would receive, apart from the live performances, where you would receive a royalty from a SAMRO and you won't receive a royalty from a CAPASSO. So, as a musician, it is absolutely pivotal that you familiarize yourself with the 8 organizations that I've highlighted. And generally, if you're a member of SAMRO, you need to be a member of CAPASSO. If you're a member of either RISA or ECHO as a record label or as an independent DIY musician, chances are you also need to be a member of IMPRA or SAMPRA, depending on which organization you choose. Thank you very much.